Today I'm going to review the Treatlife Smart Ceiling Fan Control. This is a 4-speed fan switch that you install in your wall. And it's smart, meaning it will work with your smart home if you're using Google Assistant or Amazon's Alexa. Welcome to Kyler's Studio. Now, Treatlife has a good app to use, but something you should know before you get started is whether or not this switch is going to be compatible for you. First off, you need a neutral wire for this to work. If your house was built after the mid-1980s, you should be okay there. But this is not a light switch, it's a separate fan switch, and your fan can have Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, or a remote. Now, it's great if you already have 2 switches, one for the light and one for the fan. If that's your setup and that works currently, this will work great for you if you're using Google or Alexa. But if you only have one switch that just gives power to the fan and light and you have to use the pull chains, then you have to do a little bit of checking and see how much work you have to do to make this work. I'll post a separate video that explains how to expand a single gang box switch to a dual gang box switch so you can control your light separate from your fan and make this switch work. Treatlife does do a 2-in-1 fan and light control on the same switch, so make sure you get the right one. Now, technically, if you just want your fan and your light to be 100% on or 100% off, then you could make this work, but you send the same amount of power to the fan as you do the light. So if you put it at 50%, your light will be 50%. Technically, you could wire it like that, but I'm not sure that that would be worth it to you. You could just as easily save your money and buy a dumb dimmer switch, but this one at least works with Google and Alexa. So if you want to see what wiring you have in your box, first you need to shut off the circuit breaker. A good way to do this is to turn on the light first and then go down to the circuit breaker box and have somebody else in the room looking at the light. Then flip the circuit breaker off, and if the light goes off, you got the right one. But be sure to test all the wires in the box. If you don't, you could have shocking results.
That's shocking.
So if you have no idea what you're doing, you could hire an electrician, but the instructions with this switch are incredibly good. You may be able to do it yourself if you have any idea what you're doing. The switch itself even has labels of the wires coming out of it. Your fan load, the line, the ground, etc. So the only way you could screw it up is if you misinterpret what wires are coming from your box. The switch even includes stickered labels so you can label the wires coming out of your box. And if you can't figure out the wiring, Treatlife has support, so you can email them and ask them questions. If you only have 2 wires and a ground coming from your fan, check out my other video if you want to rewire to separate those switches to control your fan and light separately. So this is how I ended up doing my wiring after I got my 14-3 wire installed. On the left here is the line coming from the circuit breaker box. I like to think of that as power. So power is going both to my light switch and one power line is pigtailed to my fan switch. Both of those switches have a white neutral wire that you tie all together with the other neutral wires. Then you should have 3 wires and a ground wire coming from your ceiling box. One of those is a copper wire. You connect that to the other copper wires. This is your ground. All the grounds connect together. One of those wires is a black wire. The black wire connects to the black wire in the fan. That is your fan load. The white wire coming from the fan is your neutral wire. Connect this white wire to the other white neutral wires to complete the circuit. The other red wire coming out of your fan is for your light. So in your ceiling box, first connect to your ground, green to copper. Then connect white to white for your neutral wire, the black to black for your fan circuit, and connect the red wire to the unique wire. Sometimes it's blue, sometimes it's black and white, but this is for your light. Since the wiring situations vary, you can either search it online and find some diagrams or contact Treatlife and they have great customer service. Also keep in mind that the wiring for different situations, if you have 2 switches or 3 switches or separate fan switches, will vary, so check the diagrams to make sure. So once it's wired, the long screws go into the holes that are in the box and the wall, and the short flathead screws are for the decorative plate on the outside cover. Okay, killing 2 birds with 1 stone here. This is me unboxing the Treatlife fan switch as well as downloading the Treatlife app. Now, if you want to connect this to Alexa, you'll want to use an email address and create a password instead of using Apple's email generation. Because in the Alexa app, you will have to put in that email and password to connect those two. And Apple doesn't integrate perfectly with that. Once you're in the app, it's pretty easy. Just add the device, and then you may have to connect to your 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi, put in the password, and you should be connected. Once you get past the email debacle, the rest is pretty easy. You add it, you select what type of switch, and it automatically adds it. I always recommend adding it through the manufacturer's app before you try to integrate it with others, because otherwise it just doesn't work that great. The physical switches themselves are actually pretty darn good. The tops are very clicky and the bottom is a little more springy but solid. The app itself is pretty straightforward. You can change the level of the fan, turn it on and off, and a few other automation features, and control the light on the switch and whatnot. The box includes the 2 screws and the 4 nuts you'll need to install the wiring into the wall. And you can change the light behavior in the app. And the app also gives you instructions of how to connect it to Google or Schmexa. And as mentioned before, the switch includes some really good instructions on how to wire it into the wall. So the bottom line after you get it all set up is, how well does it work? It actually works fantastic. The response time from the app to the fan operating or changing speeds is really fast. Asking a Schmexa to change the fan speed or to turn on or off the fan is very responsive. It works really well. The downside is that it doesn't work with HomeKit. I can't tell Siri to turn on the fan or turn off the fan. And I can't automate it through HomeKit. I can automate it through the Schmexa app, but not through HomeKit. So if you only ever plan on keeping Amazon's Schmexa or Google Assistant, this is a great option for you. If you use HomeKit or you'd like to use HomeKit in the future, I would recommend Lutron's fan control. In fact, if you have an iPhone and you like to control your home with Siri, then definitely go with a HomeKit compatible device. Again, my advice to you is buy devices that work with the most amount of platforms. Because in the future, if you decide to dump your Amazon to Schmexa boxes because there's too much advertising and want to go with HomeKit, half your devices might not work if you only buy Amazon-compatible devices. And in the meantime, if you have both platforms, both of them are compatible to work with each other. So you can ask Siri to turn on the light or the fan, or ask a Schmexa to turn it off or set a routine. If you found this helpful at all, please subscribe and check out my other videos on more details of how to wire your smart devices. See ya.